Okay, this video is going to be about how to do the final setup for your artboard for your Symmetry of Culture project. Basically, you're going to have three general areas. You're going to have the symmetry that you've done, and that's going to be at the top. You're going to create an information graphic area in here, and that's going to be about 3.5 inches high by 9 inches wide. You're going to need three minimum graphics. One is the original object that you got your pattern from, a close-up of that pattern, and then your graphic inked reinterpretation of that. This section could be just the interpretation, or if you did the radial, you could do the clipping mask. It's up to you. We just want to know what your inked version looks at. And then the last section is going to be your text information area. And then there's going to be a way of setting this all up in layers. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's open up a new file. So we're going to go to File, New, and we want the width to be 11 and the height to be 17, or select tabloid from all your selections. And we're going to do that because we're going to print that out on tabloid paper. Give it some name you'll recognize. I'm just going to call mine Celtic Final. And again, let's just do it in CMYK, and let's have the raster effects at 300, and then hit OK. Again, let's show some things that are going to be helpful. Make sure that your layers palette is checked, and that's going to be this over here. That's going to be very important. When you go to View, make sure the Smart Guides are checked, and that's going to be very helpful. And you also might want to say Show Grid, and what that does is it gives you kind of a grid area of guidelines that they won't print out, but it might be helpful when you're setting this up. Let's create 4 different layers. If I double click on the layer, it will come up and it'll let me describe it. So I'm going to call this symmetry layer. So this will be for our big graphic. And then I'm going to select another layer, and I'm going to call this info background. And that's going to be the area behind the images. Then I'm going to make another layer that I'm going to call info pics. And then I'm going to make my last layer, I'm going to call the text layer. I didn't want to do that. I'm just going to say text. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is bring in my symmetry layer. So I've got to make sure that this is highlighted. Now, let's just talk a little bit about what you're going to do to prepare this symmetry layer. So get back into normal screen mode. When I was making mine, I went ahead and I did it in Illustrator, and I made a 9 by 9 artboard, and then I constructed the entire image on there. That way that when I go to place this into my existing one, I know it's going to be the right size. Now, for some reason you don't want to bring it in as an Illustrator file, you can export it as a JPEG and then bring it back in later. But let's just say when you export it, select JPEG, and then when you hit export, you're going to come up with this dialog box. Just make sure it says CMYK, and what's really important is that it says that it's 300 ppi, and then that's going to save it at the correct size. Okay, so I'm going to get out of here. So those are 2 ways that you would be preparing your symmetry object to place. So one is to make it at about 9 by 9. and then just bring it in as Illustrator file. That'll be nice and clear. And then the other would be to bring it in as a JPEG as long as it's 300. Okay, let's go back to our board here. Okay, so let's bring that guy in. So I've saved these at the desktop, so I'm going to go File, Place, and go to the desktop, and I got a lot of stuff on here. So here's the Illustrator file. I'm going to go Place. Okay. And you can see that it's just about the right size because I want this to be about 9 by 9. The other thing we should do is we should have the rulers checked. I forgot that. Show rulers. Okay. So we can see that the grid is every 1 inch. And that's good because we want our artwork here to be about 9 by 9. So you can see that it's bordered right there. I'm just going to bring it up a little bit higher. Because I'm going to probably want more room for text down at the bottom. So that looks pretty good. If I want to move it a little bit later, I can. Okay. So just go off to the side and click, and that will place it. Now let's create our background area for our information. So I'm going to lock my symmetry layer so I don't mess it up. Make sure I highlight on the info back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our polygon tool and I'm going to go to rectangle. Now you can see that I've got both the fill and the stroke selected. I've got the stroke at 1. You know, you might want to play around with this. Maybe you want a very, very light gray, so double click on that and then I can choose from the color picker a very light gray. And you can see now that has changed, so the fill is going to be gray, but the stroke is still going to be black. So what I want to do is I want it to be 3.5. What I could do is maybe pull some guidelines. So I can do that as long as I go up into the ruler area and click and then drag. So there's a 1-inch line there. And then I'm going to click and I'm going to drag another one. So that's about 3.5. Now if I wanted to, I could pull guidelines over here, although the grid is showing me the 1-inch lines, but we can just do that. So now this guide is going to show me what size I need to pull my background into. So I'm going to just go up to here where it says intersect. I'm going to drag that. And that's good. Now I'm running out of room at the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and move this up. I'm just going to hit the up arrow. That's probably enough. I can't really read the stroke, so what I might do is change it to, let's change it to 3. That may be a little bit heavy. I'm going to change it back to 2. Okay. So now I'm going to lock this and I'm going to bring in my information picks. So what I'll do is I'll make this, we'll kind of lose the context here, but it'll allow us to see what I'm going to do. Okay, so I've got 3 picks that I've already got set up on my desktop. So I'm going to go File, okay, so I'm going to bring in my info picks, but I need to make sure I'm on the info picks layer. So now I can go File, Place, and this is the first one I bring in, and this is the actual stone that my graphics are from. I've already highlighted it here in Photoshop, but I'm going to show you how we can do that in Illustrator. So if it's not highlighted, it's okay. So I'm going to click Open, Place, and you can see that it's too big. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm on the selection tool and we see the bounding box, and as long as I hit the shift key I can move it and change it proportionally. Now, I might want to put a little text underneath there, but that looks pretty good. That's fine. So now I'll put the next one in. So I'll go File, Place, and here's the actual graphic stone. So you can see that's quite large. I'm on the selection tool. There's the bounding box. Now, what's going to be nice about having the smart guides checked is when I bring this down, it's going to show me, see that? It's lining up with the top, but that's still too big. There shows me lining up with the bottom. That looks pretty good. It's not really a very good image, but it'll do. I probably should have cleaned that up in Photoshop a little bit. I've got a little bit of background in here, but this is okay for the instruction. And then I want to bring in the graphic. So I'm going to go File, Place, and then here's my graphic. And that's really huge. Shift, drag this guy down. So there it is aligned with the top. Now I want to align it to the bottom. Boom. Now they're exactly the same size. So I might want to just play around with spacing here. Let's see if I can get this guy. It looks like they're lined up on the bottom. Let me get him to line up to the top of the other ones. There we go. Now they're all exactly the same size. That looks nice. Okay, so there's that.